of this presentation today is for me to share with you about my experience in the TIES program and what they are looking for. The thesis committee is basically for me to synthesize a little bit of what I've learned over the last 18 months and what I'm working toward with my thesis project. My culminating project is what they call it at TIES, CP. So if I call it CP, that's what I'm talking about. I'm here to basically share with you about what I've learned over the last 18 months and how that's contributing to my project. So as I move through the presentation, I'll share with you some of these materials, and we're also going to watch a little movie that was made by the director of the program, and I'm hoping it will lay a little bit of context for you into really the goals of the TIES program and what they're trying to create for Montessori educators and educators with different backgrounds as well in their program. So first, I would like for each of you to introduce yourselves and just say your name and how you know me, and maybe something you already know about what I've been working on for the last 18 months, or something you would like to learn. And I need to remember this too, but try to project yourselves, because the iPhone microphone that I got didn't have a long enough cord for this situation.
Okay.
Would you like to start?
Sure. My name is Patty Frink. I'm Julie's mom, and also the owner of a business, Mistwood Montessori School. And Julie has grown up in our family, of course, so a part of the school since she was very young. She's a natural Montessori educator, I've always felt, and I'm really excited that she's chosen to do this program and get this continuing education. And as she and I share the role of administration in the school, I feel that she will be miles ahead of me in terms of beginning and working in this field, because I did not have this kind of education starting off. So I'm excited to just learn what she's learned, and am super proud that she's bringing all of her new knowledge to the school and to her life, because I believe Montessori is definitely a lifestyle, and I think that I know that she's perfectly well suited for it. So thank you for asking me to participate today.
My name is Beth Frink. I am married to Julie's brother, so she is my sister, and she is my mom. So I have a child who's currently in kindergarten. I don't know where to look.
You're doing right. Just look around. Guys? Yeah, just talk to us.
Perfect. Sorry, fourth wall. I have a kindergartner currently at Mistwood, and I'm very encouraged by the Montessori program. I'm considering the next phase of Montessori. Do I send her to the elementary Montessori program? She will do well anywhere, but I think she will flourish in a Montessori system. I'm really falling in love with it. I was a student of Montessori myself in the Bay Area a long time ago, and I'm finding that I'd like to learn more about it. I'd like to see if I was a place where I fit into it, as far as being more than just a parent, and what that would even look like, if that's the right path for me as an individual, and how I can support my children. And I'm really excited to learn about what you've been learning about in your program, and it's just so exciting to see you really grab a hold of this and run. It's been great.
Well, my name is Diana Miser, and I know Julie from when my children went to Mistwood Montessori School. They're now, I have a freshman in high school and a senior in high school, so that was a long time ago. And it's been a total delight to watch Julie just grow and evolve during that process, and step into a leadership role in the school, which I think is just such the perfect thing for her, and such a blessing also to the school that is dear to my heart. I have had the pleasure of working with Julie with a parent connection, parent education program that we've created at the school. I'm a parent educator, and so that's really exciting. And one thing that I know about this program she's been working on is that it is just so, there's great depth and there's a holistic focus, which I'm really committed to in my own practice in life, and so I'm very eager to hear more and learn more about the specifics, but I know that she's been working hard and really taking it in, and I'm just thrilled to get to be on the receiving end of it. So, thanks. Yeah.
My name is Jessie Hunt, and pleased to meet you. I've known Julie for 20 years. I started working at Mr. Montessori 20 years ago, and at that time my first relationship with Julie was as a neighbor and friend who watered our plants when we went out of town. But I've known Julie in many other ways over the years, from taking classes from Diana to working at Mistwood to co-teaching. And when Julie first learned about this master's program, she was so excited, and I got so excited, and briefly considered enrolling as well until my husband informed me that it was time for our children to go to college, not me. But I've loved seeing how inspired Julie has been, and I've loved seeing the books that she's reading and hearing tidbits, and I think it's such an amazing thing for our school that she's doing all this further learning about education and community and leadership, and I'm excited to hear more details.
Thank you. I was really looking for more Montessori education and more, I guess, of my next step of education through a lens of how to help the adults in the learning community to have the same style of freedom and responsibility that exists in the Montessori classroom. And it seemed like this was an option. I spoke to the guy Warren, who is in the office at Ties, and he really encouraged me to look deeper into this, and definitely confirmed what I was feeling, that this was a really different style of education than anything I had done before, and it's definitely proved to be that. So yeah, the purpose really for me and in obtaining this master's and looking deeper into what I'm doing with my work professionally, as well as what I'm doing just in life moving forward, has been to, I guess, really identify what we're looking for when we move forward as educators and as community members who care about the future of our planet and the future of humanity and society and civilization and our own small communities and our families and our students. And I think what this program has really brought to light for me is how that change, those changes that I think we all would like to see happen in the world, come forward as a process of evolution based on the decisions that people make and the way that we interact with each other and the way that we interact with our environment. And I think that as a political science major in my undergraduate work, I think I've really settled into finding this work to be how I can contribute to a better world for my sweet nieces and maybe my own future kids, as well as all the students who go to our school and all the different people that we touch through our community, because we have a staff of amazing people and they all have their own communities that web out into the world and are affected by the work that we do as well. So that's what I've really just landed on this last 18 months, has been a lot of deep work. It feels like all of these books and the papers that I've written that are over there by Diana are all not focused on child development so much like I maybe thought that this program would be, but more focused on human development and humanities development. And so we're going to take a quick break from this presentation for a minute and watch a movie from Phil Gang, who is the director of this program, and he and his wife Marcia, his late wife Marcia, were the founders of this program, and his words through several different videos and writings that we've read this semester, as well as supportively on the virtual campus, have really helped me to figure out how to go deep with this work, but also be really present in how we can make these realities happen. So we'll just take a quick break and go to the living room to watch it. So I hope that gave you a little bit of background to ties, but also I just felt like it was hard for me to figure out how to, in the short time of this presentation, really tell you about the gravity and magnitude of where they were encouraging us to go as students in our brains for the last 18 months, and how like sometimes it's been really challenging to stay in that deep place and like just have the energy to go there for an hour and work on my homework and then go on with my to-do list and clean my house and go to work and do all the things. It's been a little bit like mind-boggling. Is kind of the only way I feel like I can describe it, but in the best possible way. So with all of that information now behind us, we were introduced a little bit to the idea of cosmic education, which is referring to Maria Montessori and her son Mario Montessori's creation of a curriculum that included and was holistic to the science and universal evolution of where we came from as humans. And I think they really wanted to ground the education that they were giving children in that. And a lot of what Montessori does is produce this, or kind of demonstrate this macro phase wisdom of, this is the big picture, this is the universe, and this is the story of that universe. But then to connect smaller, more actionable pieces of curriculum to that larger story, I think is really the goal in a Montessori classroom. And I'm sure there are a million examples of ways that we introduce, for example, we introduce children to writing before we introduce them to reading, and they are looking at putting together pieces, but they already know about stories and they've been read to and they understand what that language is. And once they start to put together those pieces, we come back to that macro phase of them being able to read the words on their own, and they've really taken apart and understood what they're doing based on their work with sounds and blending and then writing. And so it's kind of a big picture, small parts, back to big picture type of cycle. And just wanted to point that out. But what I do want to also note, this book, Systems View of Life, has been one of the biggest contributors to the curriculum of this program, and what these authors, Capra and Luisi, really focus on is the idea of systems thinking and creating opportunities for deeper thought into all of the different ways that components work together. So with that example of reading and writing, we can think of that as one big system. We've shown the whole, we've examined the parts, and then we return to the whole with the reading. But we can also think about environmental examples like ecosystems. And in Montessori in the classroom, we study, in the very beginning of the primary curriculum, we study living and non-living, and we understand some of the attributes that lead to having something that's alive. And then we can break that down and look into the parts of different things that are alive. There are plants and animals that are alive. And then we can break that down further. If we go in the animals direction, we break down into vertebrate and invertebrate, and we go further and further with that. And these types of environmental examples, I think, help us to kind of understand Montessori's concept of living systems working together to create the whole, introducing that to children at a very young age, and systems thinking seems to have taken a big part in how we've examined that in this last year. They also encouraged us to learn a lot about more community-based systems or social systems, and that's kind of my own wording, but for example, thinking about the interwoven nature of a culture, and again, if we look in a classroom, the kindness within a classroom we can see as a system, and we know that one demonstration of kindness may contribute to another demonstration of kindness, which may contribute to another demonstration of kindness, which contributes to a whole system of kindness. And one example that I read about recently that I really liked in thinking about teaching systems thinking to children, I was listening to a podcast actually earlier this week about systems thinking, and one of the ideas that was brought forth was the idea of teaching kids at a really young age more about the way that each action creates kind of a ripple effect, and that's the nature of a system. So for example, if you're on the playground and there are children bullying another child, understanding systems might lead a child to know that fighting or using harsh words or contributing back into that system with more bullying will perpetuate it. And our gut reaction might be to be pissed and fight and be angry, but perhaps there are other ways that we could affect the outcome of that system. So the system of bullying might be affected differently if children were given the skills to think outside of initial reaction and instead think about how their contribution to that system can change the outcome. So maybe if they don't contribute to the bullying and they choose to, there's a myriad of other options, like finding someone to talk to about it that's an adult on the playground, or walking away, or inviting that person who's angry to play a game, or whatever it may be, changes the nature of the system. Ideas for a younger classroom that this same podcast gave out for just kind of introducing this idea of systems thinking are things that we already do, like, for example, that children's book, If You Give a Mouse a Cupcake. All these things happen. It's not like a linear story with an end. It's like all these other things are happening because of that one action. So I thought that was an interesting parallel. And so with that idea of systems thinking, if we think a little bit about what Dr. Gang was talking about with the idea of cosmic education and bringing in concepts of the universe story and our place within that universal system of evolution, we have a foundation basically for our own story. And as a part of that living, breathing system of the universe and of evolution, we have kind of a gateway to wonder and really taking our own place in that universe story and our own ability to affect change to a more curious place if we place ourselves on that basically spectrum of the universe story beginning here. All of these things happened, from single cell growth to plants to people to language development to societal development. This huge foundation has demonstrated over and over again creativity, change, blossoming, growth, new ideas, and the next plane. So I think owning that concept was maybe part of the goal of Cosmic Education. And if you do go to elementary Montessori curriculum with Leah, you'll see that Cosmic Education idea and that opening up of the idea of the story of the universe as really laying the foundation to studying who we are, and then understanding how we can continue and where we keep going, and how the evolutionary process and change, we're co-creating the next thing. So Montessori really encouraged educators to give the children the story of the universe and to demonstrate the generosity of creativity, demonstrating how each creation in the evolution of the cosmos has contributed to life as it is now. So there's the foundation. And the universe story leads to the discussion of the forces of creation that live inside of every living entity. And that when Dr. Gang in that video was referring to Mario Montessori's noting of you can't stop the soul of a child from emerging. You can't stop the curiosity of creativity and wonder from flowing out of any being, but instead what we can do is to provide an open-ended education rooted in the universe story. And then we can also provide opportunity to really look at where we're going and what we're looking for. And I think what Montessori is really looking for, and what I've discovered in the last 18 months, is that the Montessori philosophy is really looking for those moments when that creativity, that innate creativity, which maybe is problem solving, or maybe it's actually tangibly making something, or maybe it's helping a community through something, or helping friends through something, or rewriting your own story in some way. That emergence of creativity is really what we're going for. And so in keeping with that idea of showing the whole picture, examining the parts, and returning to the whole, if in a classroom experience we can create a space that that really encourages those moments of creation to emerge intrinsically, the hope is that a lifelong bit of wonder will stay with that child, or a lifelong commitment to the further creation of the universe story stays with that child. And a lot of that I think of as that spark that we feel as people when we discover something that that we learned how to do that feels good. Or if we discover, we put the pieces together and we see how a system operates and that feels good. And so without providing the answers and without really telling a child what they're learning, what we're looking for is those moments of self-discovery. And I think that's really, it's kind of a tricky thing to verbalize or a tricky thing to teach, but you see it in the classroom. And I started to see it in the prepared environment of this online community, that there were times when our dialogue would go down a road of being really wordy and confusing, and it felt like everyone was confused. And then all of a sudden the conversation would change directions and we'd have a spark of just getting it. And it led to more and more questions, always. But I think that cultivation of curiosity and wonder is really part of the purpose. And I feel like that's a little bit confusing, but it is.
It's real.
It's real. And Dr. Gang, who was the speaker in that video, also wrote, it's in that floral binder down there, a document called Rethinking Education. And I just wanted to quote in that. He said, according to Montessori, optimal relationships between children and adults and an optimal environment stimulate and give support to this spontaneous development. Montessori proclaims that the secret of childhood is disclosed not from adults probing the child with a set of external measurements, but from the spontaneous manifestations of the child acting freely within the prepared environment. So, if we take those same ideas and try to broaden them to apply to the adults in a workplace, the adults in a learning environment, it gets a little bit trickier. And it was already tricky to begin with. But Margaret Wheatley is an author who I was introduced to through this process, and I'm not sure where her book is. Here it is. But she is an organization and leadership writer, at least her role in this book is that. And she talks a lot about the ideas of basically creating order through fields, invisible fields of energy, basically, and really connecting groups to their mission or their purpose, their set of shared values, and allowing that connection to guide the actions of the group and of the individuals within the group. So she really thought that, she's still alive, she really thinks that creating these discussions based on why a group is doing what they're doing, what the goals are, and not necessarily the end goals, but more the cultural goals. What those goals are would be a field, and that field could serve as an energy source to help propel organizations toward their goal. And that field also then creates a neutral container through which we can solve conflict and move through tricky situations and stay really aligned with the mission. And she had a ton of information in this book that I mean, my annotations for this book are like half of it, I'm pretty sure. But some of the things that she said that I think were really profound, I just want to share with you. She said, we now sense that some of the best ways to create continuity and congruence in the midst of turbulent times are not through the use of control, but of forces that are invisible, yet palpable. Many scientists now work with the concept of fields, invisible forces that occupy space and influence behavior. And she also said, I've played with the notion that organizational vision and values act like fields, unseen but real forces that influence people's behavior. This is quite different from more traditional notions that vision is an evocative message about some desired future state delivered by a charismatic leader. So really looking at vision, I guess, as a verb, and vision as an active way that we can carry out our mission. And I really appreciated that idea. When I think about managing adults in an education setting, it really seems like that provides a very hands-off management style where it's agreed upon what the goals are, where we're going is agreed upon, and we can recenter on that however frequently we need to recenter on that based on conflicts that might arise or challenges that might come up or questions that emerge or new situations. And it changes the game a little bit from being a top-down management system to being a collective work. And I loved that idea. And I think for a Montessori system in particular, it really rings true because that's what we do in the classroom. And the reason that 24 children can operate safely in a room with only 2 adults and lots of small breakable things and small parts that don't want to get lost and very specific ordering. The way that can work is because we've created this invisible field or this invisible container of guidelines, and we start really small at the beginning of the school year with those guidelines, and you can get one thing out and you can use it and then you can put it away, and that's the field for those new incoming students. That's the whole field for a little while, and then you add to that and you build upon it. But for the teachers, the field is a little bit more complex, I guess, in the richness of the goal, but basically harmony and natural order are the goal in both examples. And so for this idea of a shared values container, we can really, I guess in order to use that idea of a shared values container, we really rely on the ability of the individual members to self-organize. And purposeful self-organization hopefully can occur when everybody's aligned within an invisible energy field of shared goal. And so taking that a little bit into more of a science thought process, the idea of autopoiesis, which Dr. Gang introduced, but Wheatley said it in a way that resonated with me, and it was a little easier for her. Her definition was easier for me to digest than the more sciencey definitions that were in this book. But she described autopoiesis as life's fundamental process for creating and renewing itself. So basically, I think of that and extrapolate that to be self-organization. And then there's another concept there within that idea of self-organization that is structural coupling. And structural coupling pertains to an individual live entity's ability to adapt and change and pair with its environment or other entities within its environment to move further toward its mission of self-organization. So if autopoiesis and structural coupling are the 2 scientific ways that an individual entity is able to self-organize and work toward their goal. And we have created a container that is the field of shared values and connection to a shared mission. Maybe this gives us some direction for living within that right action and living purposefully in our day-to-day actions in moving toward that goal. So basically, what I'm saying is that there's potential for organisms to structurally couple and self-organize under the influence of this invisible energy field and really connect and live out that mission. And as leaders of organizations or leaders of classrooms or leaders of dialogues or leaders of families, to create this invisible energy field is basically the culture. And if everyone buys into that culture and the purpose of that culture is love and right action and the propelling of a more positive experience for humanity, then it gives you a barometer to deal with situations as they come up, conflict situations, challenging situations, questions that arise, changes that happen are dealt with then in a way that's not reactionary, but instead just realigning to the mission. And I think that's really interesting, and has been a lot of what I've pulled out of this work, has just been that idea of creating a really purposeful environment for adults to work in that feels aligned with the Montessori philosophy and aligned with those principles of self-organization, but that also really binds together the group through shared values. And so with that comes a lot of ideas of deconditioning. And I think that's sometimes where struggles can occur. And we see that in the classroom really clearly when we see a child come into our school, having never been in an environment that allows for self-responsibility and self-organization in the same way that a Montessori classroom does. There's a lot of deconditioning that needs to happen. A lot of independence is gained. There's a lot of buying into the culture that needs to happen and learning to take care of ourselves and take care of our environment and take care of the others within the community in a way that that buys into that container. And we see that also when challenges arise within a staff, that there are times when we have to figure out how to decondition from maybe past experiences that have been challenging, and that could be past experiences that have occurred within that container or past experiences that had nothing to do with that container. Same with the child in the classroom. Sometimes we are helping a child to recover from, or I don't know what the right word would be, but just to decondition from a lifestyle that maybe wasn't aligned with what they're now being asked to buy into within the classroom. It's kind of the same with management and with being a part of the adult team in the learning community. There are times when questions come up and conflicts arise, and we have to figure out how to let go of those past withholdings or kind of safety nets or just yucky feelings that sometimes are old. And I think having the invisible field or the invisible container of shared values really gives us a space within which to do that. And Capra, who was the writer of this Systems View of Life book, said, At any point along a given pathway, the structure of an organism is a record of previous structural changes and of previous interactions. So we are literally a living, breathing record of everything that's happened to us, but not just since we were born, since the beginning of this universe story. And that, that's mind-boggling and big. and I don't know exactly where to take that part, but it does shake me a little bit to think about that, you know, we're trying to direct the energy of experiences that have been happening for thousands of years and also hundreds of days. And sometimes that's easier and sometimes it's much foggier. But I think having that system set up could help to guide groups into having an easier time with conflict resolution or just problem solving in general. And I think it's kind of a Montessorian approach to management. And I just want to tell you this other gem of a Montessori idea that I didn't have quoted directly in my annotations, so I don't know if I'm butchering the quote or not, but Montessori did mention the idea of life as a long chord, and any change that happens throughout that life changes the tune of the chord, changes the tune that it makes. So any little ping that might happen along the way could alter the direction of an individual's action. And another quote from Capra is that we cannot direct a living system, we can only disturb it. So in other words, a living system has the autonomy to determine what to notice and then what will actually disturb it. And I think I think that, you know, we see that in the classroom in so many different ways, but I think within the adults in a learning community, it's nice to, is that your alarm?
We set it for 2 hours.
Right.
2 hours.
Okay.
It's probably
Okay. Yeah, we as adults, we have the ability to sometimes consciously choose, sometimes subconsciously be disturbed by certain things or change based on certain things that happen in our environment. And so I think the job sometimes of the leader in the environment is really to find those little bits of inspiration that do change or disturb the environment or the community just enough to help align with the mission. And I think that's part of the idea of systems thinking too, is that field that we create as a leader is morphing and changing and growing and breathing, and just as we keep aligning towards it, it maybe moves and we keep aligning towards it further. But to know that each individual is going to react differently to the changes that we create, and adapt and couple with that environment, and that field, that individual field, invisible field, can be that environment that inspires change within individuals. And so my thesis project is really going to be focused on using shared values to create a staff culture that's aligned with the Montessori philosophy in the way that staff can self-organize, but that's also really aligned with the Montessori mission of moving toward a caring community, of people who care about each other and themselves and their environment and feel like they can affect change. And so with all of that in mind, as a kind of ending activity, I'm hoping that we can each take a moment to think about this and give an example of how this idea of an invisible field and its influence over an individual's action plays out, maybe in a Montessori classroom setting, in the setting of a Montessori classroom, or amongst the staff in a Montessori school, or amongst your own family. Maybe if you can think of an example that aligns, where somebody in your family has kind of aligned to your family culture, or where somebody in your classroom has aligned to the classroom culture, without the efforts of like specific direction, but more, and this doesn't have to be something that's happened, it could be something that could happen. So just take a moment to think on that, and if any of you are willing to share, that would be wonderful. And I could start if you want, or you could start.
I was gonna say, maybe I could start with something that's not Montessori specific, but I just felt struck by the way my dad raised us. He never wanted there to be any rules. It was always just an understanding of family expectation. And that wasn't even, that wasn't laid out anywhere.
Discussed,
that was
yeah.
It was an invisible wall.
It was a container.
It's a container.
Yeah.
And
Whoa.
it was, in my life, just so much more powerful and effective than all the other times of my life and places where people tell you exactly what to do and you have to just
Check
do
the
that.
box. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, you had to think and consider and weigh your consequences and where you wanted to go and what you.
Yeah. That's definitely
So
an
interesting.
example.
Now I'll try to get into my Montessori brain.
I don't really have, I think I have like the least experience. I know I have the least experience of Montessori than anyone at the table. So I don't have a specific experience within perhaps a classroom setting, but I watch my children play and I see how nurturing they are with one another. Like maybe it's physically where Leah is like rubbing Ada's back while she's talking to her unconsciously, or where Ada will choose to sit really low on the couch and she will sit so her leg is always touching her older sisters. And the way that they interact with one another shows me that they've witnessed both how Tony and I respond to one another and create an atmosphere where we kind of nurture one another, but where they go to school where it's important to, they don't just, they see it, you can't be told this is how you behave with someone you care about, this is how you show someone you care, but they're living that, and it just is really rewarding to see how kind they are to one another and how they speak to one another. And I heard an example earlier of how there's a sense of kind of looking out for the other person, and I don't have any siblings, and so I feel very lucky that they have one another and that they've seen the decorum in which our household treats one another, the decorum in which the school treats one another, and that's like just second nature to them now. Because I've seen many other children that I'm close with behave differently, and
Yeah.
it's some sort of social contract going on right there.
Yeah, social contract. I like that.
I have a hard time with it. Like, to trust with that unspoken sort of just energy is going to really work. It's hard for me to not, when it doesn't work and you have to revisit it, a little tricky for me.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because you don't seem like someone who wants to give very clear rules either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is a perpetual process since it is self-renewing, and it needs to be revisited over and over again.
Yeah.
And I feel like there, when the web gets to, it's like there's cause and effect on both ends. There's the signs that the container is weak. That kind of, in a way, conflict isn't necessarily a sign that the container is weak, because conflict is inevitable. But I take it as a sign in my family that we have to revisit things. Like when it's an opportunity to strengthen the container, and to also see the worthiness of whether or not the value is relevant anymore, because we're in this continuum of change. So it's almost like the purpose of conflict itself is to help us sort of revisit. And I think growing up with having two teenagers, there is so much more conflict in our day-to-day as I'm having to reconcile my vision and then really stay awake to who they actually are and who they are becoming, and the differences within that. But the structural integrity of the container of the home or the classroom really does serve to help propel them and sort of spark their freedom to discover and become who they are, because the safety of that container exists. So I don't think it's necessarily unspoken, even though it's invisible.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's lots of ways to kind of weave that invisible field, through actions and through words or through story. I think humans have also really created strong containers and invisible field through story, and the hero's journey, and just archetypes, and what character we want to become in our own individual story or in that moment. But I feel like in the family, that's my cue to revisit the strength and integrity of the container, is when conflict arises, or when I am not liking when I have a lot of fear that comes up, which is really like the threat to me being able to carry out right action and love as my focus. I just can't inhabit both at the same time. When I'm fearful, I move into a very contracted, protective space. That's the exact opposite of where I am when I'm grounded in love, and I'm more able to be open and receptive. So that's my own, I don't know if that makes sense for answering your question, but that's my experience.
It does.
I think that to me it seems like such a great way for our staff to operate, and is so powerful and meaningful, because over the last 20 years I can't think of a single conflict on our staff that what people held on to and believed was the conflict had any meaning or consequence to our purpose or our vision of what we're doing and why we're there. And so I think bringing people regularly to that vision and that purpose almost seems like it would eliminate all the ridiculous
Micro
little
conflicts. Yeah.
that as soon as you think, well, how does this affect our vision? It has
Doesn't.
nothing to do with it. Poof,
Right.
like it's gone.
Yeah.
It seems, yes, like it can be very even though it's not really specific, it can be very powerful, or it's specific in its own right. But I agree with that. I think
Yeah.
just that coming together and having a common vision, a lot of those other things will fall by the wayside.
And when they come up, because I feel like stuff comes up, like people notice that, Sally's not watching kids on the playground and I'm doing all the supervising and they're just chatting and I'm going to go say something about it. And then they go say something about it and Sally's feelings are super hurt because of the way that so-and-so came and said something about it. And if as a manager, you can bring Sally's attention back to the fact that the mission and purpose of our school and what she's doing here is laid out in our vision statement, but also really lived maybe by that other staff member who came to her, that hopefully she'd have more understanding and be able to get over it and think, oh, right, I am working towards this shared mission of a safe community for these children, and part of that is making sure that I'm there and ready to help them when conflicts arise on the playground. And so that's all that person was trying to remind me of. And it might not always be that easy, and I do think that those little conflicts come up no matter what, but I think just continuing to highlight like the depth of what's really going on is maybe helpful.
Definitely.
You may find too that you're gonna have to find a way to navigate the shared vision,
Yeah.
visioning of the school with validating an issue,
Right.
validating a concern, so people feel certainly heard if they are upset. And so how do you take this situation or a larger situation, hear them, validate them, make them feel heard without saying the vision's accomplished, we're gonna be okay here. So that's,
Right.
as a director,
Totally.
that might be
Yeah.
something you come into contact with.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's where the story comes in
Yeah.
as well, and this radical accountability for the individual, because
Yeah.
we are individuals operating within an organism. So really just bringing light to the fact that we're all individuals with our own story, having that record of all that's come before us and what's getting, being able to just pose the question and have that as our walking meditation always. What part of this requires action? What part of this is me and my own story? And
Right.
what part of this is about our vision? And when we move from that point, we actually really get to ask for what we want. Again, without this demand culture or the right and wrongness that we get, that duality that really starts to constrict us and make one person wrong and one person right. To
Right.
be able to say, can you help me?
Mm-hmm.
Help. I really, our vision of keeping the children safe and having all eyes is super important to me. Can you,
Right.
pay close attention at this,
Right.
time or
Yeah.
whatever.
Reframing the ask a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah. To have a little bit, to be reframing the ask to highlight the container.
Because the purpose of that container is to have, is neutrality. So
Yeah.
it's not about what I want and what you want, where I'm right and where you're wrong. It's
Right.
what we're working for together
Right.
and the greater good,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm. That I can see that in every family or every organization or
Totally.
every group.
Yeah.
Looking out for what's best for people that are co-working,
Yeah.
or cohabiting.
Yeah, this
or-
woman is not working in education at all. Like the examples are like corporate
Yeah.
that she gives in this book.
Well, and then what the wisdom that Marshall Rosenberg brings to that too, and I feel like there's a way to meet the needs of the we, even if we are like subjugating our own internal need, but we can meet that need in a different way.
Right.
So the infinity of strategies available to us to meet needs, and looking at how we have to weigh our individual needs and the needs of the group,
Right.
and just knowing that we aren't going to be, stymied or stilted forever because we aren't getting our own individual need met in
Right.
that moment in that way, and really just, making that
Yeah.
that part clear that we, when we're here, this is what we're doing. When we're
Right.
elsewhere, we can have other ways to meet our own needs and differently.
Yeah. Definitely.
I love the way Dr. Gang kind of said, like he saw, you don't really see something. When you think you really see something, sometimes you don't.
It comes
and you
back.
revisit
Yeah.
it, and then maybe you do later, maybe you never do. But to really, to allow yourself that, you may not be perfect, or you may not be able to see that story or that vision or understand what went on until much later. I thought that was important.
Awareness of is different than seeing.
Right.
Yeah. His when he talked about observation, it was just so
Yeah.
interesting.
And the heart wisdom.
Yeah.
Right, so the difference between the heart wisdom, which is hard won and over time built into this felt experience, like the Little Prince, what is essential is invisible to the eye and can
Right.
only be seen with the heart, or
Yeah.
like, that part I feel like comes in too. It takes time for that to develop.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he said kids get it. Sometimes kids,
Yeah,
get it
totally.
right away, and
Well, in that
Yeah.
presence, kids get that,
yeah.
They get it and then we
Yeah.
forget it.
Right.
And we have to give it again, like all of us.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you all very much.
You're welcome.